Kia ora. I'm going to share with you a layout using the These Are My People collection from Close to My Heart and a gorgeous cut file by Virginia of Confessions of a Paper Addict. So part of this process I want to show you is how to get the cut file into Cricut. So here I've opened up the Cricut app and I am navigating through to find where I have got my cut file saved. So when I find these cut files, I save them to my Dropbox, and so you can see I found it here. I'm clicking on it. It's just downloading it because I've downloaded to Dropbox on my iPhone just when I've seen it come up. It needed to download it to the iPad before I can import it into the Cricut design space. So I used the import way back at the start, and here I am just getting rid of all the bits that I don't want to be cut into it. So I've had to make it bigger, and I found it was a bit tricky. See how I made a mistake? There's always the undo button. So what I'm doing is just getting rid of all the wee pieces that I don't want, that I want it to cut out. So now I've just grabbed my Apple Pen. You could have made the screen a bit bigger there to be a bit more precise with your finger. It works the same on a computer where you would just use the mouse to navigate and click in these spaces to take out the bits that you don't want to be part of the cut file. So I'm just going through all these gorgeous little hearts that Virginia has popped in to make sure that they are going to cut out as well. So I'm pretty sure this was the PNG file that I am editing, and I'm just having a look around. You can see up the top there in the top right of the screen that I've done that. And so now I am importing it into here. I'm going to give it a name, so I'm going to do it the COAPA, which stands for Confessions of a Paper Addict, which is the group where I got this cut file from, and I'm calling it Be Kind because that's the main message on it. So Virginia created this cut file bearing in mind that New Zealand, which is where I live and where Virginia is also from, is in a level 4 lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic that is sweeping the world. So I'm working on a layout. We are now in day 7 of this lockdown, and we have been told it will be up to that it'll be at least 4 weeks, which means it could well be more weeks than that. So here I'm in Cricut Design Space. I'm resizing this so that it will fit into a 12 by 12 piece of white daisy cardstock, and that's what I'll be cutting it out from. So I'm just have to resize it. You can see that it went there, that it was going to be a bit too big. Now in this you can adjust it to where you want it to sit on the mat, but I'm actually just going to make the most of the cardstock I've got and put it near the top because I'm going to be sticking it onto either another piece of cardstock or a piece of pattern paper. Now I had to Bluetooth connect to my Cricut, and it did keep dropping out. It didn't hold, so I had to do this a couple of times. And eventually it made that connection. I'm not sure if that's because my iPad battery is getting a bit low or what's going on there, but maybe third time lucky. It did eventually work. So I'll try it again, wait for that connected bit to show up. Yep, there it is. And here we go. So moving on to cutting it. Now I am going to get my mat ready for putting the white daisy cardstock on it. You can see there on the screen that it was set for poster board because I was cutting some glitter paper out recently, but this is just going to be cardstock plus for my white daisy. So I'm just pressing that down on the mat there, making sure that it's got a good fit because I don't want the grip to lose and for it to move around while it's in the cutting machine. So there you can see I've adjusted the paper type and it is cutting away quite happily. So while it's cutting, I'm having a look at my photo here, which was from last Sunday, so it's a couple of days ago, just of the sunset, and looking at how it connects, which papers I prefer the most from this These Are My People collection. So that cut is just about finished, and we will take that out when it is. Sometimes the last little bit seems to take forever. So now I'm going to take that out of the machine once the flashing light tells me I can, and you can see how beautifully Virginia's design here is just lifting off beautifully, and it has those nice fine details that I think Virginia's cut files are fabulous for. So picking up that, putting those other pieces aside, I will make use of them a little bit later on. So looking at how that photo connects, I could have stuck the white it straight on here, but I decided that I wouldn't. So I'm just trimming off the ends of the photos here. It's at times like this that I'm really thankful that I have a selfie. It means that I can print the photos that I want to scrapbook when I want to scrapbook them and not have to wait for a printing service. So I've decided that I'm going to back the heart cut file with that blue that it was sitting on before. So I've turned the blue paper over and I'm using a pencil to draw around the outline of the outside piece from when I cut it on the Cricut. So the reason I've drawn this line on the back is because I don't want it to show on the front. So now I'm going to leave a little bit of room, bearing in mind that the cut file is very thin, around this heart. So I'm just going to go so far and then I will stop that. You don't need to see me using scissors. So here we go, I have cut that out, and so I notice that when I stick it down here that the blue heart is a little bit bigger, but I'll be able to trim that later. I find this an easier way to back my cut files often than little scraps and then trimming it out. So choosing what paper I want on the background, and I decide that that stripy black stripes with the dots is the kind of paper I want there. I did toy with putting white behind it, but decided against that. So now I'm just going to trim off this zip strip, and I realise that I actually need to measure it, so I'm pulling out the trimmer so it's the full 12-inch width so that I know the exact height it needs to be. That little zip strip's quite cool. It's white with the little black dots on it, so I'm going to actually use that on this page a bit later on as well. So I could just stick that gorgeous cut file down right where it is on that pretty paper and leave it at that, but I decide that I actually want to back the little hearts that are in there as well. So from the Cricut mat where I cut those out, and I'm just placing this background here because I'm going to cut these hearts from this paper. And because it's going to be behind a covered piece of paper, I don't need it. So I'm just making some good use of the paper I've got and cutting that around there. So I use the hearts from the cut file, the bits that I wasn't going to use that was still stuck on the Cricut mat just before, and I'm using these as templates to cut around so that I'm going to be able to stick them in. So I'm leaving a little bit of room right around the edge of that heart, rather than too close, because I want it to be able to overlap enough for it to stick to the back of the cut file. So you'll see on this one how I've done that. I'm not cutting on the pencil line, but leaving some room where I'm going to stick that down a little bit later on. So I've cut two of them out, and I've got the third one to cut yet. Now that where I've cut that out on that pretty piece of paper will be covered up a little bit later on. I'm also, so I'm just going right down the corner of this piece because it's a new kit that just arrived today. So I was very thankful that that came through customs and did arrive. I've been looking forward to using it. So I am trimming around that last little heart, again leaving room so that I can stick that onto the cut file and behind it, so it's going to tuck in there. Now I need to do this part before I stick it down onto the blue. So here we go, I'm turning it over and I'm just going to go straight onto the mat here for this. So I'm using the liquid glass. Now it's got the fine tip applicator, but I do find that it often takes the pink bit off as well, so I have to readjust it. But because it's got a little pin in the lid, it's always ready to use and to stick onto the page. So it's just got that nice fine tip, which makes it super easy and smooth for moving around the edges there. and just needs a little bit of pressure ready to stick it on. So these, when I turn this over, you'll see how these 3 little hearts have all been backed. I'm not going to turn it over though, obviously. I'm going to actually put the blue piece on behind now as well. So I am just doing a little piece at a time. So I've done the bottom of the heart to start with. So I'm just going to stick that down there. And partly this is because I noticed earlier that I hadn't cut it quite evenly when I trimmed around the outside edge of the back of this. So I'm going to stick it down piece by piece, allowing me room to trim some more off a little bit later on. So instead of gluing on the cut file, I'm just gluing right around the edge of that heart there. Seeing how far out I'm going to be able to pull the frame without distorting it. So I'm going to glue down the lettering. I could have left these a little bit loose and tucked some more behind them. Another thing I'd wondered about was putting some patterned paper in behind the lettering, but I did love that pretty blue and I just wanted it to shine through a little bit. So sticking those down and then the rest of the heart before I get my scissors to trim around it. So just a little bit of pressure to smooth that down, putting that lid back in so that that little pin inside it can keep it nice, and trimming around the top there. So I've trimmed around the top and I'm getting ready to place this onto the paper. I sort of play around with how far down I want that heart to sit and decide to keep it fairly near the top. So I grabbed a scrap of white cardstock and I realised later on I could have used the inside of that white heart that's still on my Cricut mat, but I didn't. So I'm just going to back that to help the photo stand out from the page a little bit on some white daisy cardstock, and I'm going to use this beautiful pink spotty paper here as another bit of a border around this photograph, just for a little bit of interest to be peeking out underneath. So I've got those there, sort of arranging and thinking, where do I want that? And I've got that zip strip again, and I will eventually stick that down the bottom of the page. Now I'm going to pull in some other embellishments from the These Are My People sticker sheet, and also from the These Are My People stamp set. So I'm going to stick this part, the photos and things, down now, because I kind of have got a bit of a picture in my head of what I'm going to work on. So I didn't stick that, when I put that tape runner down, I didn't do it too close to the edge, because I'm going to tuck some other bits and pieces into it and I wanted a bit of room for that. So I'm just lightly distressing with my fingers the edge of that photograph. And the tape runner on the big heart, ready to stick that down, all done by eye rather than measuring. And then getting a stamp that I decide I want to put inside that pink heart. It just fits perfectly, and it says we rise by lifting others up, or each other up, which I thought fitted beautifully with the whole be kind message of this page. So I'm using the archival black ink stamping block, and I turned my mat over because it's got a great foam side, which helps to give a really good impression when you're stamping, and just using my stamp chamois there to clean that stamp off. So I'm turning the mat back over, ready to stick down the photograph. And then I'm going to use around the edge of that heart cutout, and I'm going to put some of These Are My People flower stamps, and I'm just doing 3 of each. You can just see how beautifully that impression is with both that ink combination and that mat. Stamp chamois again to clean it off, and I'm going to use the smaller flower as well on there, doing that a few times before cleaning the stamp off. And then I'm going to fussy cut around each of these little stamps. I will do most of this off camera, just showing you that starting point of where I go to with it before I have them ready to stick in behind the layout. So I'm just going to put a bit of tape runner on them to hold them in place. I just wanted something tucking in, peeking out, just to again add some more interest. And I toyed with colouring the flowers, but I decided I actually liked the black and white with them. We've got some pretty colours in the layout, and I didn't want to take over those or change where your eye is sort of drawn to the photo currently. So I'm going to stick that zip strip down the bottom. Sorry, it's a bit off screen there. You possibly can't see what I'm doing. I was just putting a bit of tape runner down on the other side of that zip strip before I stuck it down. There's some little cool blackboard hearts on the sticker sheet that came with this collection that I'm just adding on at random points around the page. It is random, but there is kind of a feel or a look to it as to where I've put them. Now there's a little house here, and part of the layout is the message of being at home and being kind to each other despite, because we're stuck here together for the next at least 3 weeks now, since we're in day 7, which actually happens to be my son's 17th birthday, being an April Fool's baby. Poor kid. It hasn't made for a very exciting or social birthday for him. Normally on birthdays we would go out for breakfast and then we'd be planning a meal out. My husband cooked us some pancakes this morning. We've been diving into old recipe books lately, and so he has used a recipe from Sophie Gray, who her cookbooks helped us through many years when the kids were quite little. They were very budget-friendly recipes. So I'm just writing the date and the time on here. One of the beauties of having these on my phone are that the date and time that the photo was taken is actually saved in there, which is good when you're looking back and you haven't documented things straight away. So normally we would also go out for a dinner for a family birthday, but we're going to be having burger and chips at home here tonight. When we first heard that we were going into lockdown and that takeaway shops would be closing, my son got on his bike to get to a friend's house so they could get to McDonald's before they missed out. So I'm just using this journaling, the zip strip down the bottom as a bit of a place to add some more journaling. So I have added some up the top in a tag there, but there was and that was sort of a reminder of what the sunset sort of spoke to me. So it's sort of a personal reflection, whereas the bit down the bottom's telling a few more details of what's going on in the photo. So I'm just going through my sort of sequins and dots and things like that to choose some that I think will work with this colour, and I decided to add a sequin in the centre of that tag at the top, that sticker tag, and just looking at the colours and things that I've got on some of these, ready to stick them around the page. Again, these just add a little bit of dimension and a little bit of interest, and they're often a finishing touch that I use for pages as I go, thinking about what looks right, where it fits, and sort of places I want people's eye to go into or to be drawn to for a bit more attention. I'm going to have to get some more of the silver glitter gems, I think. These seem to have been a bit of a favourite. And there we go. Thanks for watching, and I hope you will give downloading cut files a bit of a go if that's something new for you, and thoroughly recommend this These Are My People collection from Close to My Heart, and that stamp set I can see myself using many times over. Thank you.